Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to tonight's season inaugural Venture Lab. We're very happy to have you here. Title of the program tonight, Successful Bootstrap Ventures from Entrance to Exit. How did they do it? This is actually the first in a multi-part series dealing with how to finance your startup. And we know that the next one on January 10th will be on crowdsourcing. John Kimmich, who is a recognized expert in this area, will moderate a panel of 3 companies who've successfully done this. So that's the next one. Tonight, we're starting with bootstrapping, which is actually the way that 99.9% of the companies in the world get started and sometimes even go to exit. And tonight's companies are examples of exactly that, from start to exit. So we're really excited about that. And please stay tuned for our future alternatives beyond crowdsourcing. Probably something to do with incubators and or angel investment. The MIT Enterprise Forum, for those of you who are here for the first time, is the preeminent organization of entrepreneurs in the global innovation economy. It was founded in 1978 and produces programs and events about innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship for an engaged community of 50,000 thought leaders through a network of 28 chapters worldwide. VLab itself is a program of the Enterprise Forum of the Northwest. Our specific mission is to help entrepreneurs succeed by providing education around the nuts and bolts of building a successful enterprise. The goal is to help you learn how to plan, fund, and operate a profitable company and ultimately sell it for a great return. So let me ask, with that mission in mind, how many folks in the audience are entrepreneurs or would classify themselves as that class? Well, great. Okay, looks like that's about typical. Somewhere between 30% and 40% of the audience, I'd say. For how many is this the first venture lab that you've been to? Great, thank you. We appreciate your attendance and hope you'll be back. I'd like you to make you aware of a couple of other coming MIT Enterprise Forum events. Next week, kind of over in the block next door at the Washington State Convention Center, is an MIT dinner program entitled Obstacles and Opportunities for Entrepreneurs and Education. It'll be moderated by industry education veteran analyst Frank Catalano. The program will be on Tuesday evening. There should be handouts on a chair near you, if not in your chair, that describe the program. So please take a look at that, and we hope to see you there. And on December 5th, we'll have a fall demo event with 6 finalists showing their very latest inventions. In many cases, the first public unveiling of whatever it is they've created to wow the world. And among those companies going back in history was Swipe and Hydrovolts, for those of you who follow green technology companies. And there have been others as well, but there are some real standout companies, and it's a pretty exciting event. We'd like to thank our sponsors, whose names have been shown on the splash page here, and hopefully on tonight's program, because without them, none of this would be possible. We'd like to especially thank Frommer, Lawrence, and Haug for their premier sponsorship of VLab and Demo. And with that, I'd like to, I should add one more thing. MIT is a volunteer, MIT Enterprise Forum is a volunteer organization. We're always looking for people to help in many different places in the organization. So if you're interested, please let anyone wearing one of these name tags with a green ribbon on it know, and we'll get you hooked up with the committee responsible for helping to bring volunteers in and give them something interesting and exciting to do. So now, finally, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Alex Modelsky. Alex is an attorney, but please don't hold it against him. He practices business and technology law with Adder Wynn, which is actually in the building next door, where he serves as outside general counsel to Puget Sound technology companies, including a number of startups. Alex practice combines general, corporate, and intellectual property law, anything from formation of companies to complete licensing transactions involving multiple research institutions. During his career, he has served as corporate counsel for a multinational technology company, acted as an angel investor, chaired the Northwest Entrepreneur Network Board, and helped review and revise legislation such as the Uniform Computer Information Transactions Act, there's a mouthful, and Washington Trademark Statute, and the recent Washington Online landmark legislation dealing with impersonation, which I think Governor Gregoire signed into law just earlier this year, did she not? A year ago, okay. So, and I know it's a model law that's being looked at and adopted by other states as well. So with that, I would like to turn the program over to Alex, who will introduce our panelists. And we will take just kind of a momentary break while we slide the chairs over and turn the blinding screen off. And then we'll move forward. Oh, I'm sorry. Should say one more thing. Format. There'll be about an hour of discussion with Alex asking his insightful questions, and then we'll open it up, and everybody up here is fair game.
Welcome to our event. I represent a lot of startups, and there's usually a lot of talk about capital and investment, and can you help us raise money? We really need money. And so it's nice to hear about companies that either didn't want to raise money or didn't raise money and then had good exits, right? They didn't give away a lot of the equity. They were in control of their destiny. They didn't have a board of VCs or angel investors breathing down their necks. I don't know if you have been hearing sort of the debate. There have been a lot of companies that have moved into the Seattle area over the last couple of years because we've got a lot of talent here, and so they come to hire these talented software engineers, people who have built great companies in the past, and so they come in, hire them into their enterprises. And a lot of times when they're coming up, they're looking for already formed teams. And one place to find the formed teams is within companies that are startups. Now, if the angel investors or VCs have invested in that company and the companies are coming into Seattle and looking for talent and hiring that talent, very often it can be on terms that are pretty favorable to the founders. So the founders might go to work for a large corporation that came in from another part of the country. They're going to get paid out certain earn-out over time, or they're going to get paid, they're going to be paid out salaries over time, and those poor angel investors or VCs who came in and put a lot of money in to pay for development and pay for team formation and all that sort of stuff, they can feel like they're being left out in the cold. And so it's a sort of a touchy subject when entrepreneurs sometimes are talking to angel investors and to VCs. So it's kind of nice to talk to people who just had a real simple story in terms of the financing, and really had an idea about a business that they wanted to build, who then had a wonderful exit, and hear how they did that, how they thought about it, and that sort of thing. So So first, I'll introduce you to Cha-Chin Lee. Cha-Chin was once upon a time a vice president at Sony Computer Entertainment America and Zipper Interactive. And I take it that Zipper probably got bought by Sony. Is that right? And then prior to Sony, he worked on award-winning products at Microsoft, Valve, and Activision Raven Software. And so Cha-Chin and his group wanted to develop games on a new platform, which was the Facebook platform. And so when I first met them, it was just a group of, I think, probably 3 guys.
3 guys, yeah, let me turn this on. Yep, we were, hello? Yeah, we were 3 people. And basically what happened was, I was at, previous to that, I was actually at Sony, and it was actually part of an acquisition as well. And I actually entered that company, it was called Zipper Interactive, and it was at 50 people. And I helped grow that company to 150 people in about 8 months, and just, experienced rapid growth, and wanted to really help the founders of that company exit that company. And it happened very quickly. One of the founders was able to leave after we were acquired. And after that, basically decided to, for me, I was at Sony for a while, and decided to start my own company.
Yeah. So, the people that you formed the company with, one of them was a guy that you, went to middle school with?
Yeah, so, when I wanted to start the company, I kind of thought about what exactly I needed. First, I'm more of a big picture guy. I can dig into details, but I'm more comfortable thinking big, and I'm technology focused, but I'm also not a coder. So I needed 2 types of people. One is I definitely needed like a web genius type, to come on board and help develop right away. And the second person was just someone who was very detail oriented, and I knew who could do anything to complement my skills as well.
Okay. So Jay Harper is on my right, and Jay, you never shared with me much about your past history before starting PureSec. So maybe you could share a little bit about your past history before I got to know you.
Sure. So before we started the company, actually all the founders of PureSec were all employees at Go Ahead Software, which is a startup. Was a startup probably 1999, I think, maybe 98. So they were a startup, and when actually some of the founders were, I think, the like 3rd and 4th employees, and I got there like in the 20s, and we ended up doing kind of, I don't know how much I should say, but kind of a .com thing, and expanding pretty big, up to about 150 people, then they eventually exited, and they got bought by Oracle, I think, last year.
So you worked with Doug Brown.
That's right,
over there? Okay.
Yeah, so, people might know Shannon Swift. She does a lot of the entrepreneur stuff. So she was our HR there at that company. So anyway, yeah.
Okay. And so then
that's actually how I met you, is through Shannon, I think.
Yeah, probably. So then the idea for PureSec, where'd that idea come from?
Well, so working at Go Ahead, we initially started doing embedded device stuff. So this was probably 99 or 2000, and people were talking about putting a web server in your refrigerator. So Internet of Things today, people are still talking about putting a web server in your refrigerator. However much sense that makes. But we liked doing it at the time. That it was cool stuff. We actually had an open source web server. That's actually what attracted me to come to the company in the first place. Anyway, so then we ended up changing based on chasing potentially a bigger market, but what ended up being a much more volatile market, which was the 3G rollout. So we kind of switched over to doing high availability software, and that's actually what was sold to Oracle last year. But so we basically wanted to get back into devices. So there's a certain point in time when several of us decided, hey, let's get back into the device world. I think this stuff still isn't done, and it wasn't really so much about putting a refrigerator in your or a refrigerator in your web server, or the opposite. But we started looking around and said, things aren't going there, but what really needs to happen? Well, it needs to be secure. I mean, anything that people are actually, any company that's actually going to bake a web server into their refrigerator has some financial reason to do it. And maybe that's a silly example, but you can think about the things like vending machines and ATM machines, or maybe where you swipe your ATM card on a parking meter, things like that. So we started saying, hey, as devices get on the net, and now we call it the cloud, then it was the net, it makes sense to pretty much no one's going to want to put that functionality in unless it's secure. So we just kind of decided that we were going to write encryption software for devices, and that's what we did.
Okay. And Cha-Chin, so you had already been in the game business, so how did you pick this new platform?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, there was a point where I kind of looked at the studio I was running. It was about 150 people. Each product was on the development side costing over 30 million a year, just developing, no marketing. The life cycle of the products took about 5+ years from beginning to end. And at that point in time, I was looking to Asia, and I found a lot of games that were basically free to play. And so right now, if you flash forward many years from then, right now you're looking at a lot of businesses that are very disruptive using the freemium model. But back then, this was like, I started thinking about this, in 2006, 2007, and I finally left in 2008. I really wanted to take the free-to-play model from Asia, where if you're not familiar with this, it's literally, you get to play a game, and it's completely free. And what happens is that you get to a point in the game where you're so engaged and you love the game so much and you're so passionate about it that you're like, okay, fine, I'll spend $1 or $2 or $3, and sometimes players spend $10,000 or more on virtual items, powers, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see this model now across not just games, right, but also other types of web services, obviously. And so for me, it was, I'm kind of the guy who likes to look at stuff and go, how can I break this completely? And so it's not a good place to do that in the console game space because everything was just so entrenched. And so for me, it was like, okay, how do I actually go to online games and completely break this apart? And so that's how the journey really began.
So I have a comment on that because I didn't know your story before now, but I think there's two things you mentioned that it may not directly relate to bootstrapping, but I think directly relates to how do you come up with an idea that will potentially be successful that you can do. And the first one that you said, you looked to China and you kind of saw what was happening there, and that's something I really believe in. It's kind of a classic statement that the future exists, it's just not evenly distributed, right? And that's just absolutely true. I mean, it's what you're saying. It's kind of what we saw. We saw a few people even back in the late '90s, with this getting devices on the net, and we said it's not distributed, but it'll eventually get there. So I think part of bootstrapping for me, and it took me a lot longer, was just basically waiting for the market to get there.
So to that point, I think as entrepreneurs, we're always trying to project the future a little bit to see where people are going to go and where things are shifting. And sometimes you just can be completely too early. So for example, even in 2006, 2005, I was talking to people who are starting up mobile game companies or mobile apps. And if you can remember the world before smartphones, they're all like Java apps. You needed to migrate to 10,000 different type of devices, and so I knew people who had entire businesses just porting one software to all these different devices, and obviously those companies are really no longer around. But back then, the vision for many of those people were they went to Japan and they saw that. In Japan, really, they're still way ahead in terms of the cell phone usage. But they were like, whoa, we can bring this to the States. But I knew a couple of VC-funded companies that went bust because they were just too early, for example. Yeah.
Right. I think that quote I said actually was attributed to Japan. But yeah. So I was talking about Japan. And then I think the other point is, so if you're bootstrapping, I think you you have to basically be able to hold on long enough. I mean, you have to trust that you pick the right marketing and you put 6 months in or 12 months in or maybe even 2 years in if you could afford to do that on your own and bootstrap to develop the product, but then still be aware that the market might not be there, or you could just be a bad marketing. That could not be your skill set, and if you're bootstrapping, you don't really have a lot of money to hire expensive marketing stuff. So that's sort of the other thing. But regardless, I think there's a real timing thing, and so. I don't know. I mean, one way to get around that is if you do have an idea and you still think it's good, put that tech on the shelf. Java, it's a little bit hard because I don't know how portable that was going forward. But I think with some tech, you could actually put there, have it sit and gather cobwebs, go get a job, go work somewhere for a couple of years, and when that market comes back, quit your job and try and go out again with that same
or
tech.
quit your job and try something else.
Yeah.
And then the one other thing that you'd said that I really liked was that you were trying to break into mobile games, and that you were looking at the state of mobile, and you kind of saw that Facebook was a lot more open platform, a lot easier to get into than Xbox or like Nintendo DS or something like that.
Yeah, I think because this is a bootstrapping panel, let's kind of frame everything around that. The reason why I'm talking about it in this context really is because when you're bootstrapping, you're really thinking about revenue first. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges of bootstrapping is that it's really hard to bootstrap when, in a business where you're not earning revenue. And so there are pros and cons to that, right? Like when you're thinking revenue first, in bootstrapping, you're eating what you kill like every day, right? Like you're either creating a service that people are subscribing to, or your business providing something people are buying, but you're really living off that revenue and you're trying to scale on top of that revenue, and there are limitations to that. So it tends to make you think smaller, to be honest. And so I pride myself of being able to think big and think of stuff that I want to change the world with. But the reality is, when you're hiring people, when your revenue's coming in, and when you're ramping up accordingly, it makes you more conservative because, suddenly, we're building upon the Facebook platform, and it was very new at that point. And I still remember, we launched something, and the first day someone dropped $100 and then dropped another $100, and then another person dropped $20, and I thought it was people hacking our servers. So I actually called up the people providing the credit services and said, "Hey, are we being hacked? Do you see these?" And the lady on the phone was like, "You're nuts! Like, what are you talking about?
What are you complaining about?
You're crazy." And I was like, "Whoa!" And so when you see that revenue stream growing, there's always that sense of paranoia, like, "Oh my God, maybe someone is still hacking us." Like you wake up in the middle of the night, you go, "Is this even real?" And whereas I've been in situations where you're just well funded, you don't really give a crap about tomorrow or 3 months later. You're really caring about 10 years from now. And when you're in that moment, you're acting brave and huge, and you can be pretty cavalier and think about big stuff. But when you're back in the bootstrap mode, you tend to be more shy. That's my experience anyway.
So let's say you had taken some money from investors. Let's say you'd had a couple $1 million invested in your business. First of all, how hard would it have been to raise money for what you did?
Well, that's the interesting part is that at first when we had not much revenue, I tried to raise money in Seattle, and the Seattle community were very nice, but I think they looked at me like I was nuts most of the time. And then when I went to San Francisco, everyone and his mom was doing this. So I had an interesting experience where on one hand, people were like, "I don't get what you're doing." And on the other hand, I would walk down the street and bump into someone's elbow and go, and that person would be like, "I'm making social games." And so I'm like, well, and then when I came back here and the money was starting to come in, I was just like, I'm not going to waste my time anymore. I'm just going to focus on building product, building my company, building value, and see where it goes. And luckily, it grew very quickly. So.
And how about with you, Jay? Well, what I'm saying about going out raising money, raise $1 million or $2 million, and did you think about doing that? Did you try doing that?
No, first of all, I'd say I don't think you were lucky. I think you saw where the future was going, and you were able to to time it right. And also for the exit thing, I think you did a good job of picking a new platform. Just because large companies, when you have a new platform, really need small companies to come up with something unique that makes them unique. I actually still see that now. I'm always thinking of new ideas. Nothing that would impact my current employment, of course, but but I'm always seeing ideas, and a lot of them now revolve around like I don't know, new platforms that are struggling. So if you said, okay, let's say Windows Phone, right? So that's great. Well, there's gonna be a lot of money behind it, but there's gonna be there's a lot of like people looking for killer apps on there and stuff like that. And a lot of times it's gonna be really small teams that are just brought in, acquired in. So I think kind of aiming at these large companies that are going to be looking for differentiation on the new platform is really kind of a critical thing. So, but to get to your question, no, when we left, when the founders left Go Ahead, we were actually pretty unhappy with the VC model. We felt that it was fine to take big bets, but we also felt it was very we were stretched in unnatural ways, basically. And I probably am less of a big thinker guy and more of a detail guy, and it was just really frustrating for me to not have a very specific, very limited product set that really met some, even if it was a very small subset of market demands. When you have a lot of money in venture capital, you can spend 3 years building something that goes nowhere, and I basically didn't want to waste my time anymore. And I think the other founders probably agreed with that. We put a lot of heart and soul in there, and yeah, okay, options didn't really work out for us. That's one thing, but I think it was more just our time that we felt, and we got paid for our time too, but we wanted to do something. We wanted people to be able to use what we had done, and we just felt that bootstrapping and going out on our own was kind of living. You kind of live and die by the sword. I mean, you've got to do something that people will really use and really pay money for. As you said, you've got to get the revenue stream right away. And it's trial by fire, but it's really, I think, more fair. It's you're not making things up. I mean, you're really getting the feedback, and people vote with their dollars. And so, we did not look for funding. We thought that the discipline was actually really good. I guess you kind of echoed that too. The discipline was good, and we liked that. We actually did.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about. You were talking earlier about taking money, and you were talking about timing and the timing. How long could you persist in what you're doing? And you guys were essentially how many guys when you started?
Yeah, we started with 3 guys, and it's 2002. We probably had product out there after about 6 months, so probably about early 2003.
So let's say you'd taken $2 million.
Well, yeah. So I mean, we initially just had a year's worth of salary in the bank basically, and we said, well, we'll burn through this, and the job market's it actually wasn't really that great at that time, but we figured out it'll be fine. We can get jobs afterwards, and so that's really all we were risking. So if we weren't able to get the revenues, basically we would have done what I said, which was we'd probably just take the code, put it on the shelf. Maybe leave a website and some AdWords up or something, but just kind of set it there and wait for the market to hit, and then come back out again. Go off and get jobs and come back to it. So I think that's how we would have handled the timing thing. It's not the typical thing. People have an idea and they want to grow really big, and they have to hit it right now and today. We just kind of sensed that it was early, and so we didn't feel that pressure. We did start getting some competition. We actually had another company that was started up, and they actually partnered with the web server vendor at Go Ahead to do SSL actually for that Go Ahead embedded web server, which was kind of a wake up call to us, saying, hey, we're actually the guys who worked on that, and somehow a competitor is doing that. So we had kind of anyway, we built up more competition, and when that happened, when we did start feeling the heat, we felt we needed to grow, and so we actually did in I don't know, maybe 2007, something like that, go around and look for funding. Going in and out. So we did go look for funding at that point to grow. It just really didn't fit what the people we were really. I don't know. Really a better way to say it. I mean, we've negotiated big deals with big customers, and so it's not like we don't fit in the room. It just what we felt like we had to say to get the funding wasn't really it wasn't really honest, to what we could feel. I mean, it was it's a very large hockey stick, and you kind of in talking to investors, I mean, they're basically saying, look, just put this down and say, 3 years from now you're going to be making 10 million. Next year you're going to be making 5, and this year you might be making 100,000, but that's okay. That's a hockey stick. It just didn't seem realistic to me. I didn't think the market was there, and whatever. And so we could use the funding. I think it was it would have been a good long-term play, but most people aren't looking for that. So,
and your ability to put something on the shelf, if you had taken a bunch of money and you ran out of money, you don't get to put it on the shelf and then come back to it. You don't own it anymore, right?
Right, or we would partially own it, or something like that. I mean,
try to figure that one out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, we would probably, hopefully, have thought of that beforehand and just put that in the contract.
So how about for you, Chechen? I mean, if you had taken a bunch of money, were you thinking in terms of how much time you would have and when the market would be ready for you and those sorts of things?
Well, I mean, the second time we thought about taking money was actually right around the time of us being acquired. So literally, we had grown, and we were pretty much under the radar, but we were very profitable and growing rapidly. We had hired about 12 to 15 people in the span of a few months. Very competitive salaries, full benefits, actually non-startup type benefits, and so for us, it was like, hey, let's do this thing. It looks very real now. Let's ramp up. And then suddenly, we realized we just, for me, you kind of have to do everything once before you really know what you're doing. Like the first time you might get really lucky, but it's probably luck, right? And so I consider myself to be really lucky, even though we did a lot of right things. But honestly, this was my first company I started completely from ground up and got to that point. And so when we got to the point of, okay, what should we do? We had VCs calling us at that point. We had, angels calling us at that point. We had Zynga calling us to want to acquire us. We had strategic investors, and it just so happened that at that point, Playdom, which was at that point Zynga's biggest competitor, called us, and the CEO John Pleasant, who now runs Disney, because Playdom was later acquired by Disney. He's running that, and when he came, we just hit it off right away. It was one of those things where, okay, I can either go raise $50 million and try to compete with Zynga. I can raise $5 million and probably get crushed, honestly, because it's at that point. I mean, it was a land grab, right? I can sell my company and earn very attractive multiples because honestly, we didn't take any money, and it was just very nice. We could go with a strategic investor who would tie us to a specific company for a while. And we're just like, you know what? We need to partner up with someone in some concrete way and also take money off the table. So we actually sold to Playdom in 2010 in March, actually. It closed very fast. It was, it was like from beginning to end, the negotiation took like 2.5 months. They were in their roll-up mode too. So I knew something was going to happen with on their end. They were either trying to go IPO or get sold to the next, the next tier up. And so we kind of we decided to sell for cash, stock, and a little bit of earnout. And it was an extremely fair deal. And as Alex can probably attest to, it was probably one of the faster deals that he's seen. There was just a lot of momentum. And so the deal was so simple in a way that Alex could take, he was on vacation while he was doing the deal, and we didn't have to interrupt his vacation. We had many time zones separate between us, but it was able to get done quickly. So
yeah, I was working on it at night.
Yeah, I remember that.
But yeah, so maybe we should talk a little bit about sort of how it was that you guys ended up tying up with Authentic.
Sure. So actually, I think just to go back with what you were previously saying
Go
about
ahead.
what would have happened if we took funding. I don't know that it was really our skill set to grow the company in that way. I think one of the things that I kind of became comfortable with over this whole process, and again, it's my first startup really too, is just learning really learning strongly what your strengths are and being able to play to those and not get beat up too much about the weaknesses you have, basically, and so. But so the company I mentioned that also started in '02 really with the security product is a company called Makana, and I think they're currentently valued about 100 million. This is in VC valuation, not public market valuation. But I think, gosh, they started the same as they actually started as two people the same year we did, and they went through rounds of VC funding. They're Bay Area. Rounds of VC funding, then they've got strategic investment from I think Intel and if this is being taped, I may be wrong here, but they had a bunch of strategic investment and stuff, and I think they're probably the total investment must be 50 million or something. I haven't been really adding it up lately. So as a company started at the same time as us, we're pretty much the same product. We both had a embedded SSL and encryption stacks and stuff like that, and so that's where they are. This is where we are. I'd really honestly say the jury's still out as to who's gonna end up better with this thing. I mean, we're still working on our product and with a bigger company. I think if you compared the company, I don't mean Apple, but the intermediate company that we sold to, I hazard that our revenue story is a lot better than theirs, regardless of whatever their VC valuation is. We don't have one because we were actually a public company. But anyway, so it's kind of
you mean Authentic?
Authentic was a public. The guys who bought us were a public company, and so they had their valuation was I think. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly.
Well, so then why don't you keep on going with of what happened? So you got bought by Authentic, and then within how much time you got purchased by Apple?
Yeah, so we had a common customer with these guys, Authentic, which is a publicly traded security company, and they had really focused more on fingerprints. They had a lot of patents around fingerprint sensors, silicon-based fingerprint sensors, not the glass ones like you'd have at the airport. But anyway,
these guys are from Finland, right?
No, they're based in Florida. The fingerprint sensor guys are based in Florida, and they had actually acquired a bunch of other security technology, a bunch of other software security technology. And one team was in Helsinki, and one team was in Amsterdam. One team was the north of Eindhoven, and so they had a bunch of teams that they had acquired from kind of all around the world. And it was the same thing as you said. I think for me, we initially talked to the head of that division, the non-fingerprint division, and just really hit it off. I mean, it just just really seemed to make sense. And so when we did that, I think initially we were really just talking partnership with them. I mean, we were thinking, hey, you guys should just resell our stuff. I mean, that's kind of the mode we were in, and they were saying, no, as a security vendor, it's really important that we own the IP and that we are the ones providing the security. We don't want to be reselling something else. It doesn't look as strong. And I think that's true. So, so they just kind of pushed and said, hey, we'd like to acquire you. And, that was actually happened relatively quickly to get to some kind of term sheet, I suppose. We actually didn't believe the guy initially that we were working with because he actually wasn't on the Authentic's public website as like one of the VPs. And so we didn't believe him at all that he had the money. We kind of threw out a number that we were interested in looking for. And we were like, well, this is what we'd be looking at. Can you sign for that? And sure enough, he was like, oh yeah. So finally, we ended up we asked for their CEO and CFO to just sign like a one-page letter, with kind of the range of valuations that we were looking at on it. So we figured, okay, if the CEO and CFO of the public company have seen this, we're probably pretty good. And I think it happened. I mean, the whole thing probably from the time they met us to the time we closed may have been 6 months. The actual, I don't know, it might have been 3 months of legal or something and due diligence maybe. So not too long. I mean, we're small, so I mean, it shouldn't really take that long. But they were a public company, so there were some extra hoops they jumped through for that.
So people always hear that you have to really keep your documents straight, your equity's got to be right, you've got to sort of think about this 2 or 3 years in advance, plan it, the whole 9 yards. So how did you do that?
Yeah, no, I mean, no. I mean, so I prefaced everything by saying I really, we really played to our strengths and just tried to minimize the weaknesses. And our strengths were really technical and seeing the market, and our weaknesses were probably marketing. It's a whole nother story, but we actually used an open source business model at the time, and we released our initial stack and our basic product as open source software because we felt that was the best way to really get it out there and for people to see us. And it actually worked swimmingly. I mean, we would beat the venture funded guys in head to head competitions. With big customers, they had no problem. I mean, going with us, even though we were a just startup security.
That was kind of your version of freemium.
Yeah, that's true. Freemium might be a good way to go. I mean, I think now the open source business model, we've kind of seen what happened with it. I think there was a couple successes, but but at the time it was a really good way for guys who are really technical focused to get marketing without being marketing people. But so I don't know.
Talking about the issue about sort of getting ready to be acquired.
Yeah, getting ready to be acquired. I mean, we actually weren't. I think you're saying that because you know our story. So we actually used Alex was our kind of go-to legal guy. We actually handled a lot of contracts ourselves. I mean, so we would typically try and use our paper for contracts with any smaller companies and the types of companies we sell to. It wasn't like we're selling to consumers with games. I mean, we would work with like Motorola, who's building a set-top box, or HP would be building a printer and need security in it. So we would work with accounts like that. And sometimes those guys make you use their paper. And if we were using our paper, though, we work with Alex. I mean, it's an honest plug. I think you really helped us understand the contract that we had built up, and when we had to negotiate it, a lot of times, I'd say probably 70% of the time, we didn't involve any legal at all. We just did the negotiations. If it was using our paper, we knew what we could give on it, what we couldn't, and Alex was really helpful with that actually. So as a bootstrapper, you've got to wear a lot of hats, and so we wore the legal hats, and we at one point had a nice discussion with Intel Legal. After they were using our open source stuff for something they shouldn't have been. But anyway, so we didn't really have a lot of other things in place. When the acquisition came around, we had Alex was our go-to guy, but then we had a lot of tax concern issues, and so we actually went also with another firm at the same time, and so we actually had a lawyer there. Do you remember who they were? We don't have to say that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think it was this Summit, isn't it? It's
No.
Brown was...
No.
Oh,
sorry. Anyway, but if you ask, no. So they were a great they were a great one to work with. But anyway, so at the time we just basically didn't have any of that documentation. And in fact, I think what Alex might be getting at is that we hadn't really ever reconfigured our options. And so what that means is we between the founders, we had always kind of had a promise that we would adjust the shares, and I guess we didn't really do things in a smart way where we kind of had a pool and then all the founders gained out of it at a time. We basically just we'll print 10 million shares and we'll just cut them up right at the beginning, and everyone just owns them outright. So
and you kind of thought you would have time when this would happen. You kind of thought, we've got time to clean this up.
Right. And so I remember early on, I think it's maybe startup.com or something is real long time ago, but they had this big fight, I think, at their first funding round where they had this big fight internally over equity, and one guy ended up leaving and stuff. And so it wasn't like that with us, but definitely I think we probably could have put a little bit more planning and actually getting those things done before we were in a position to sell, but we just really weren't ready at all. I mean, we kind of were in a position to sell, and then you start thinking, well, if we change and we change the ownership around to something we can agree with, there's a lot of tax implications, because if we then sell the company within a year of making those changes, there's some pretty big tax implications, even though there's no real money on the table. When you're talking just printing 10 million shares and you're not worth anything, there's real money on the table when someone actually comes in with a valuation, and now you kind of have to even people out, and so there's a lot of contention about that too. So
it's sort of like the thing that Mitt Romney's so good at is getting the capital gains treatment. You want her to be good at that, right?
Yeah, actually, if he has a job opening, we still have some other things. This we were actually like you. We were paid in so part of our deal was with stock. It was public stock in Authentic, and then they were bought by Apple. I think the stock was about, it was like two something, high twos when we were bought, and then Apple offered $8 a share, and so, but not 12 months had passed. So the way it happens, it's short term. So yeah. So there's always the tax issues. I mean, some things you can do about, some you can't. We actually ended up getting some really good advice for how to change our ownership at a late stage like that, and actually make it work out. And so we had two lawyers looking at it, and then we also actually had a CPA who we brought on, who was also looking at that, and actually a CFO that's been a local CFO at several businesses around here, also helping us. And so we all kind of put our heads together because this was kind of a big issue for us. The other things didn't really matter. I mean, we literally had so they did an asset purchase rather than just a full company purchase from us. Didn't really matter either way. I think tax-wise didn't really matter either way. We just thought asset might be a shorter document. So we didn't really have anything ready. I mean, it was literally, probably.
And with security software, somebody buying your stock would have had potentially liabilities. So that might not have been a good idea of a way to purchase a company that writes embedded security software.
But I mean, I guess so we didn't really have any list of equipment or anything. I mean, your equipment might have been worth $5,000 at that point, just on laptops really. We were going month to month rent, and online services like Dropbox and stuff like that. So we really had no infrastructure. So it was pretty much buying the team and buying the IP. And so as you were mentioning, I mean, that could be a problem if we had investment, because they were primarily buying the team and IP. And actually, they were buying our revenue too at that point. Our valuation was actually based. They were very heavily, couldn't think outside the revenue box, which was really difficult for us to overcome. So I think that probably, and we had no financial models or everything. I mean, to give you guys an example of how we bootstrapped it, we started up this way and we never changed. We completely different from you. So having a good benefits package and stuff from your customers, we literally. Took the money as it came in and just chopped it up and paid it out. So if we didn't get a contract for 3 months, we didn't get a contract. If we get a contract in for $100,000, well, we divide it up in the way we divided, and we write out checks.
So I'm going to cut you off and get back to Cha-Chin. So Cha-Chin, sort of, Jay's been talking about sort of those discussions, right? About looking at the revenues and sort of the inside baseball. So maybe you could talk a little bit about those kinds of discussions when you were being acquired.
Yeah, so I actually, for me, those are not as interesting, so I kind of just fall asleep a little bit, just to be totally honest, and that's why one of our co-founders is really we had probably the best documented, we're opposite of you, right? We had probably the best documented legal forms ever. They were filed neatly. The due diligence process was they were shocked at oh wow, okay, I can access everything within minutes, so. But that was really a testament to one of our co-founders who, I mean, for me, I look at legal documents and I want to know the main points. I want someone to tell me, and I want to be done with it, and I want to go, okay, make it happen. That's why I try to surround myself with good people who, understand the nuances a little bit more better. But for me, the interesting part of the acquisition process, and once again, because it went so quickly, the interesting part was the more human parts of it, because the whole thing went pretty fast, and we got. I still remember this, right? I was negotiating with Playdom, actually, on my birthday, which is December 24th. And, when you're in a bootstrap startup, you're working all the time, and you're just, I guess, in any startups, right? And so I was pretty tired, and I still remember we were kind of waiting to get on a ferry to go across Bainbridge Island because my in-laws lived there. And, we were the car's out there, and I had to get on the phone to negotiate the deal, and my kids were crying in the back. And I was like, okay. So I shut the door, I got out of the car, I was talking, and the ferry's coming, and my wife's begging, hey, the ferry's coming, but the interesting part about that was, once we got the letter of intent and this deal started rolling, And I had met the CEO of Playdom. Well, he's not the founder of Playdom. So they had brought him on to scale. I mean, before that, he was the COO of Electronic Arts. And if you know Electronic Arts, it's one of the biggest game companies. And so he was actually brought on to help scale that company. And so the founders at Playdom had a lot of say as well in the acquisition. And so actually I had to make a trip out to Playdom. And one of the founders who I like a lot and have a lot of admiration for him, he's like 25 and he's like extremely talented and smart dude. But the first time we met, we got into this conference room and
What world is it that we're old?
Huh?
I mean, we're old in this world somehow.
well, I mean, I am 38, so I mean, I'm not old, but 25 to me is a young, smart dude. I'm like a I don't know, middle age smart dude. I don't know, but anyway, so we got into this conference room, and I'm pitching this trying to close the deal because honestly, like he still has to sign off even though we have the paperwork, and I'm in the room and selling this thing, and little did I know he had actually Zynga, is very litigious, and they were actually suing the crap out of Playdom at that point. Just trying, like it wasn't even a real thing. It was just trying to slow Playdom down, and he was summoned to go to court somewhere, and it was just stressful. And he came in, and he wasn't even paying attention to my presentation, and he looked like he didn't even give a crap. And I was there, and I was looking around the table. Everyone was kind of smiling except for him. He was just like, in the middle of it, he's like, "Hey, I have some review to go do. I have to leave now." And I'm like, "Okay." So we flew back, and I was just like, "Wow, this is probably not going to happen. This is very stressful." And so John Pleasant, the CEO, called me, and he's kind of like, "Dude, that didn't go so well, But it's in a way, it's not really up to him because he at that point he was evangelizing for us. But I said to him, I said, "Listen, let us go out there one more time, and let me talk to him privately, and we'll have a brain meld. And it'll either completely blow up at that point, or it will go really, really well." And luckily, we flew out again, and he was much more engaged this time, and I grabbed him afterwards and got in the room and was able to have a really kind of heart-to-heart discussion about the future of Playdom, the future of our company, and what we could do together. And really, that was the thing that expedited the entire deal. It really made all the paperwork kind of just, okay, let's just make sure that it's sound and let's move forward. So that was like the most stressful thing for me.
So let's talk about, here you are in this no outside investment startup, running pretty lean, and from knowing I know you know how to run lean, right? You know how to save money, and you're really good at that, right? So now you get acquired by Playdom. What changed?
I think, I don't know. I agree with you, but disagree because, we know how to run lean, but we weren't like paying people $25K a year, like kind of thing.
Right.
Like I mean, we were paying, like I said, very competitive salaries, and I had just come from Sony, and I literally called up the HR person who gave us the entire package at Sony, and I got the same package for the startup, and for me, like that's not running that lean,
How about the furniture and the office and that kind of stuff?
The furniture was more a function of there are things I care about and there are things I don't care about. So if I didn't have co-founders who cared, I would have had like a cardboard box and sat on it because there's like I just don't worry about those things. But for example, we went to we were creative about it. So we subleased a place in Bellevue Place, like if the same building as Daniel's, and traditionally that's actually a really nice building and it's actually really expensive, but we were very creative about subleasing and getting really, really great rates, for example.
Right. So you were spending money on talent, but you weren't spending money on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I would say we were spending money that that mattered, you know, spending money on things that mattered. And on top of that, sometimes, like I personally didn't, I was probably a little conservative, not because we didn't want to pay like or spend money, but rather, like I said, you know, when you're bootstrapping and when you're the CEO and it's just, you feel like your mind's a little clouded. And so actually, you know, my co-founders convinced me to move into bigger and nicer places because our revenue could support it. And one thing I did find out, and this is like, it's magical, right? Like you grow to the extent that you create, meaning it's like, you know, I don't know koi so much. So like, so this is probably a, you know, somehow bad analogy, but you know, as I understand, you know, koi's, you know, fish grow as big as the pond you give it, right? And so as soon as we moved to bigger and nicer places and could afford it, et cetera, we immediately, like our mindset changed and it just was able to adapt to, you know, bigger thinking. So that was pretty interesting.
And so what about when you got to Playdom? Did anything change?
Yeah, so the acquisition, you know, we still stayed in Bellevue and Playdom was in Mountain View, now it's in Palo Alto. And so we were acquired in March and Playdom was acquired by Disney in August. And so it was like two cultural shifts at the same time. Playdom's very, you know, it's a startup, Silicon Valley startup, runs very fast. It's just very analytics driven. Disney's very brand focused, just moves a little slower than Playdom. Although, you know, it needs to, right? I mean, it has a lot more interest in many different areas. And so for us, it was like best of three worlds in a way, because we were hidden from both parties, but we had the resources of both companies. And to me, that was, it took a lot of over communication to make sure that we gave enough transparency. That's just the function of being a remote studio, right? But once we had gained that trust, it was awesome because, like, for example, when our employees all got free Disney passes to go to Disneyland and got like 50% discounts to go to, you know, stay at Disney hotels and merchandise, you know, we made a Marvel game on Facebook, and that's doing really, really well because Disney acquired Marvel as well, right? And so, you know, we were able to take everyone out to, you know, watch the movies, like in a really nice way. And I don't know, that everyone really enjoyed that.
Okay. And so, Jay, maybe you can talk to that same issue of sort of you got acquired by Authentic, then you got acquired by Apple. You know, what's that process been like? And is that kind of, when you were in the process of selling, were you worried about that? Were you thinking about what's it going to be like? And you had a big earnout feature, so maybe you could explain the earnout and how that works.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I used to have to say the same thing everyone told us. You know, don't do earnout, but that's what you always say, and it ends up happening. Yeah. So the transition for us actually really wasn't that big a deal initially to Authentic. It is a public company, but they had, as I said, acquired the teams in Europe. So we had 3 teams in Europe, and they had sales all around the world. So they had just remote, you know, sales office or people working at home. And so really, it was pretty attractive to us because we kind of felt that they knew how to basically run a company that had development teams all around the world. We actually had development teams also in Prague, and I think Hungary too. So yeah, I mean, for us, it was like, okay, these guys aren't going to have any problems with us, you know, working remote. I mean, it's so easy to do so much online now that, in that sense, I mean, we just stayed in our same office, and culturally, things didn't really change that much. I mean, it's we're very, very revenue focused at this company, so it's a lot like what we were on our own. So we were basically just moving into a bit of a bigger pond, but I think we fit really well. So culture didn't change that much.
Did Authentic help you to sell your products?
Well, I can't comment on that.
Okay, all right.
So part of our deal was an earnout. So what that means can mean a lot of things, but it basically means that you don't get all the purchase price like on closing. You get some based on some measure of performance, whether that's just time in the chair or you know, in our case, it was some revenues around kind of the technology we were bringing to the table. And you know, obviously, if you just start thinking about the issues, it's really, it's really pretty hard to figure out how you're going to account that, how you're going to account for product. What happens if you work for 2 months with another group and you kind of have some of your technology in there, but not all, and this and that? Do you get the, they sell that for a big deal? Do you get that included?
Or a bundled sale.
Bundled sales. It's a big mess, especially when you do. These guys have the same kind of sales models as they're selling to OEMs, Samsung and things like that. So how do you handle bundled sales with earnouts and stuff like that? So it's a big mess, and we didn't really want to go there, but we believe that going with these guys we would grow, and our revenues would grow, and so that's what our earnout was based on. And so yeah, part of the earnout is it was their job to help us grow by providing resources and whatnot. Then so quickly, the Apple acquisition is really recent. Apple basically, I think in June, offered like $8 a share, which is a public company. So they just offered $8 a share. I think it's the first public company Apple's bought. Don't necessarily quote me on that, but that was the talk at that time. And so Apple's used to actually closing things extremely quickly, like 3 weeks start to finish quickly, to come in, find a small technology company and literally just be done. And this did require, because we were a public company, it required a lot of SEC filings and stuff, which is how it actually became public. Otherwise, I don't think the media would have even heard about it until it happened. So anyhow, yeah, Apple did that, but then there's a waiting period for approval. And effectively, I think we actually became part of Apple just in October. So you guys had the Disney passes, we got iPads and an Apple Store discount. So there you go.
Nice.
But yeah, so that's really the main cultural thing with Apple. It's only been a month. There hasn't really been a lot of merge in. I was down at Apple and met the guys and stuff, but we haven't really changed a lot. So
Okay, so I got more questions, but it's really time to open it up, I think, to the audience and answer questions that you might have. So what's that? Yeah, I'll hold mine in reserve. So what questions do you folks have? Larry. Oh, Larry doesn't need a microphone. Unless you want to get it on the film, though, don't you? He wants to get it on the video. Yeah, I don't know. Is everybody able to hear Jay when he speaks?
I think people can hear, but I don't know how well it's recorded. It sounds right here.
Maybe you said it, but what were the revenues and number of employees when you sold?
To the extent you guys can talk about revenues.
Yeah, I unfortunately I can't go into the revenues, but we were about 12 to 15 employees when we sold, and post acquisition it's grown to 45 people.
Yeah, and we had people in the interim, but when we sold, we were the 3 founders still.
So, can you guys talk a little bit about the first year or so? How you initially bootstrapped. Was it the 3 founders putting some money together and then burn it out, or how did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah. So for us, I started on this thing full time. It was around 2008-ish, late 2007, 2008-ish, and then one of the engineers, actually the co-founder, who's the engineering co-founder, decided to I was trying to convince him to work on something half-time while he still collected his salary, and but he was brave enough to go, nope, I'm quitting in 2 weeks and you can't stop me. And I was like, but we're not even sure what we're doing yet. He's like, I don't care, I'm quitting. All right. So but that was the best thing that happened, because honestly you can't do it without going full time. It's just not really possible, because for me, when I'm working on something, I can't split my mind 3 ways or even 2 ways sometimes, And then we had the other co-founder. He was actually working half-time until we generated enough revenue, and then he quit his job, and at that point he basically got his salary comparable to where he was at.
Yeah, for me, I would echo, the exact same thing that you said. that's one of the strengths that I have, and a weakness as well, is that I really can only focus on like one thing seriously at a time. And I also thought about the same thing. You know, I could stay at my job and work nights or work on something, and there was no way I could serve two masters. There's absolutely no way. I mean, if I had another idea, I had to just be full bore into that and completely shed all the past behind me. And so I felt exactly as you did, and actually the three of us founders felt that way. And so how we did the first year was a combination. I mean, we might have kind of said, yeah, let's just say that we'll use, effectively, just have our not be paid for 6 months. Basically, have that much money saved up. Really thinking more like a year out of money saved, and it doesn't have to be saved at the same level of the salary you're making, but just you figure what your personal burn rate is. I mean, it is really what it comes down to. So, just looked at personal burn rate, and we all kind of figured, yeah, we can put at least 6 months in, and then actually we ended up doing a bit of related work that was actually just custom contract development. And so that kind of gave us a little bit of boost of money, and that was basically when that happened. We were like, okay, well, we can definitely last a year or more now, and we just kind of went for there. So that was the first year, and then, as I kind of mentioned before, I mean, how we paid. I mean, I guess we were all lucky. We trusted each other. We worked together. And so basically, there really was no constant salary. It was basically, yeah, I mean, eat what you kill. So, we were all, if we could get a customer and, yeah, sign them for $50K, $100K, or whatever, we just split it, put a little bit in the company and split it amongst the people. So we didn't really have any salary plan or anything like that. Yeah.
So let's go, Dave, get another questioner.
It's, as I understand it, quite rare that the first idea that a startup comes up with is the one that actually succeeds. Now, it may be different in your cases, but had you guys had places where you had to pivot either in a large or small way where you discovered, okay, what we're trying to do isn't really going to work, we're going to have to change something?
Oh yeah. So I think for me, I had a thesis, right? My idea was, hey, it's going to be games as a service. It's going to be tied to an emerging platform somewhere that's going to grow rapidly. So we're going to kind of slipstream behind something that's rapidly growing, and we're going to be a freemium model. On top of, besides that, yeah, we had no idea what we were doing, and even when we did, we were completely clueless most of the time. So, I came from a world where dev cycles were 5 years, right? And so going into it, it was just too slow. Like, oh my God, how do I even think about that? So we actually forced ourselves to release products in 2 weeks, and they were so crap that, literally, my own wife wouldn't even touch it. It's just crap, right? But it did one thing, which is it broke me out of the perfectionist, because I came from a world where I'm gonna launch this thing and it's gonna sell really well, and then that's it, it's done. But really on the net, when you're releasing these things as services, the good thing is you fail and you release another 2 things and release another thing in 2 weeks, and suddenly something takes off, and then you just pile on. You go, wow, that took hold. Let's keep developing it, and that's how we did it.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah, I'm surprised at this kind of similarities we have, because we also had a quite rapid release cycle. So our whole marketing model was basically based around AdWords and being listed on open source sites and being distributed in Linux distributions and stuff like that. So every time you do a release, that code goes out and it basically hits a whole bunch of servers. And you actually, in our code, we had links going back to our site. So we actually had a lot of constant referral links back to our site. I mean, Google's probably figured that one out by now, but at the time, anyway. So I think we were forced to evaluate more quickly, being bootstrapped, what we were doing. So I don't think that we could go for a period of a year and then realize that this isn't working and we have to change what we're doing. I mean, I think you have that luxury if you have funding, but you don't if you have to, make revenue. So, I mean, it sounds like I think we're both saying that, in releasing often, we constantly were kind of, it's like an airliner, I think, is actually only on target like 2% of the time, right? It's always, course correcting.
Although to that, in the beginning when we shifted course, we were more blind than later when we shifted course. Meaning, in the beginning, I didn't really understand. I came from a product space, so once again, you build something, it's great, you release it, it sells a crap load, you're done, right? So I just wasn't analytics driven. I just didn't really understand what that even meant, to be honest. And so it was a pretty when you don't have visibility into your customers, and they're leaving or coming or paying you, but you have no clue why, then pivoting a lot actually gets you nowhere. And that's what we were doing in the beginning. But now I'm much more savvy because I've learned painfully that you really need utter visibility into what your service is doing. Why are they paying you? Are they coming back the second day, the third day, the fifth day, the 10th day? In which part of the sales funnel, like what day into it do they usually pay? What's the average, payment per customer? Like all those things we just didn't really look at in the beginning.
Those payment terms are funny because we have a contract with Motorola that they give us their paper and we look at it and they're like, our default payment terms are 180 days. Like 180 days, like why are you even hiring accounts at that point, right? I mean, to turn things in. No, but the default payment is like 180 days, and there's no negotiation on that. That's how long it takes to get the money. So anyway, and also to let you sit down, we didn't change what we were going to do, but we scaled it way back. I think we initially thought that we were going to do this really big thing, and then we realized that the market was really just this small little part of it. I mean, our company name was PeerSec Networks, and the idea was secure peer-to-peer networks. Peer-to-peer was kind of interesting around that time, and we basically wanted to, if you deploy a bunch of wireless access points, so we wanted to be able to, set the configuration in one wireless access point or something like that, and have that over peer-to-peer be replicated across. So basically, device management over peer-to-peer device networks. But in order to do that, we needed security because obviously you don't want someone reconfiguring, whatever it is. So we looked to write the security piece and realized there wasn't really anyone doing it out there, except the one competitor that we had. And so we ended up just doing that. We've never done the peer-to-peer or device management. Yeah.
So it turns out what you finally were successful with was initially you thought a sideline.
Yes. And I mean, we were really biting off more than we could chew. I mean, in reality, we kind of had this grand vision of really cool stuff. But when it comes down to it, just doing the security piece is a big business. So.
Great. So let's go ahead and move on to this gentleman.
Hi. This is a question directed at Chia. Were you really scared about doing the freemium model in the first place versus the traditional sales model? And what if you were to throw a game up on the Droid or the iOS marketplace right now? Then would you prefer freemium or a traditional sales model?
Well, since we're amongst entrepreneurial people, I mean, I was scared all the time. I was crapping my pants every day. Honestly, I mean, but the one thing I really, really did believe in, though, throughout this whole thing is that the freemium model is entirely disruptive, and I mean, in essence, it's like how the MP3 came about and completely destroyed the music industry, and that's the way I see it. And so, if you talk to people who don't really believe in the model, there are many, things that they'll tell you about why it's not going to work, it won't last forever. But and I don't think everything will turn freemium, obviously, but I believe that anything that's entertainment based, anything that cost of acquisition is usually a big problem, and you're trying to get massive amounts of people to come look at your product. I think this model can serve for those type of businesses. So iOS games, yes, I believe that's basically the way to go. And if you look at the top grossing games right now, they're all freemium models.
Okay. Any other questions?
Second. Thank you. I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about sort of the initial stages of having a concept and then from there choosing your team or your co-founders or your early employees, and if you can talk about some sort of strategy there that you've learned or some things that you would do differently next time.
Yeah, so there's a book called Founder's Dilemma, and it's an excellent book. I don't know when it came out, but I read it pretty recently, and I read it with a lot of hindsight, right? Like I read it and I went, whoa, okay, this book is really speaking to me. But honestly, the most common ways of finding co-founders are people you've worked with or your friends. And I can tell you that the technology person, I actually recruited him for the sole purpose of doing something like this together. So he's definitely my friend, but it's definitely a business first and then friend. And then the other person was someone I knew from like junior high and high school, like Alex said. And he was definitely my friend first and then got into, business later, right? And there are definite pros and cons to that. I think the pro of having someone that you're friends with and then you become a business partner with is that, well, that person you just trust on a very deep level, especially if you've known that person for a long time. It's great because you when you're starting this thing and things are a little scary sometimes and you can't really project that all the time too, right? I mean, you have to be closed off to that. You have to work with people you trust a lot to be very open with. And so that's perfect for that. Well, the downfall of it is that I had never worked with him on a professional level before. And I think I freaked the crap out of him. The first day we were working together, and I'm pretty subdued right now, but I'm a pretty high energy dude, and I think he was like, "What the hell did I get myself into?" Like literally, and so that's that. But I think Founder's Dilemma is a great book, and if you read it, you'll see a lot of different experiences that people talk about, and it's you should read it.
Does anybody know who wrote Founder's Dilemma? Christensen? Or Christian?
It's across the chasm from Founder's Dilemma and stuff, yeah. That's what it seemed like.
No.
No.
I think it's like Wasserman. It's a I think it's a Harvard. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, Wasserman?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's purely about the whole notion of, it actually talks about bootstrapping. Do you want to bootstrap or do you want to go for a VC model? And you're optimizing between control and wealth. So you can probably tell which one is optimizing for which one. And when you're hiring people you know very well, like your friends, you're immediately going towards optimizing for control and not wealth. And to optimize for wealth, you really need to expand out of your own comfort zone and network. And actually, most of the time you should be VC funded and should hire business people that you for the sole purpose of creating this enterprise. And I didn't go into that with that notion. I just kind of let momentum carry me. But the reason why I think the book is so good is because I read it and I was like, whoa, okay. It actually rings very true.
Yeah. Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just agree. I mean, I was friends with the guys, and we knew how we actually worked together, and so we knew that. Actually, those two guys had gone to the same high school, so so again, I mean, it was a long kind of chain. I don't really know how much that helps. I mean, if you don't have friends that are tech, it's not really that helpful an answer. I think, we did try and grow organically. We hired contractors at a certain point. We hired business people. Salesperson and technical contractors, and really weren't happy with anyone that we found. We ended up we had an opportunity to hire two other friends on a contract basis at a certain point in time, and so again, it doesn't really help you, but unless you have a ton of friends in the field. But we ended up, the only contractors we were happy with were the friends that we hired. And yeah, I think in general we knew we needed a better sales and marketing. We just didn't know. I mean, marketing always seems like, well, you should be able to go to a marketing firm and just have a budget, 15 grand or 25 grand or whatever, and do that. I'm not saying a small budget. I don't know. It just never worked out that we really got what we wanted to for that. Sales too. I didn't really understand what the key thing about sales is, and now I think I know a little bit more.
So let me ask another question. So part of what the companies think they're buying when they acquire you is a team, right? So in both negotiations, the acquiring companies were very they said over and over, we're really interested in keeping the team. We don't want to lose anybody from the team, that sort of thing. And it was a big part of the negotiation. So how did that end up working out for you guys, Chacha?
Yeah, so that's definitely true from our perspective because, at the end of the day, when you're building entertainment software or anything that's creatively driven, or you're dealing just with human resources that have special skills, you're really trying to acquire those people and keep that culture and make sure that, those people stay around. And for us, our special skill at that point collectively was the fact that we're one of the early people in that space. And so we actually had a really big advantage over anyone who was trying to enter it, just from a pure standpoint of we've been learning this over time rapidly. On top of that, I think my personal experience attracted them a lot because I had, helped scale a previous company in a big way, and I, for me, like I enjoy bigger companies as well as startups. What we ended up doing is we actually went into the deal and we took a portion of the founder's equity and played them match that and created a pool of options for all the employees so that they had incentive to stay around and be happy. But it turns out that, and this is, I think, one of the advantages of Seattle. I think Seattle has a lot of advantages and disadvantages, but one of the advantages of Seattle is that I think people here generally want to work in one place for the long term. They're looking for a good home. They're looking for a big idea, but they're also looking for people to create, that company with for the long run. Whereas, really at Playdom, the turnover was very, very high, and so the people at Playdom were always looking at us like, "Oh my God, you guys are gonna all quit tomorrow." And the truth is, I left Disney in July, and the three founders, we're all gone now. But, I created a succession plan, and, they're all there, and the revenue's continuing to explode, and everyone's happy, and they're hiring more people. And I think that's just a function of Seattle as a interesting place to create that type of company.
Now, Tom left relatively quickly, right?
Yeah, so the technical co-founder left with a part of his earnout. He just kind of left without taking that.
Yeah, and so were you guys kind of ready for? I mean, how was the company ready for that to happen? He's a technical guy. Seems like that would be really tough to lose him.
So I think Tom would agree to what I'm about to say, and I'll be recorded. So hey, Tom he's an engineer. He's not a manager, and he doesn't want to be around people and teach them stuff and help the company grow to 1,000 people or more. He wants to be somewhere working on really interesting and difficult problems.
I know he.
Yeah.
He told me that over
Yeah.
over drinks.
No, and he's awesome at that, and I would work with him again. It's just probably not at a phase when it's growing to hundreds of people. But he knows that as well, and for him, he just wasn't interested to stay for that next phase. Now, I asked him. I said, you're a founder, so I can put you in a room somewhere and you can watch movies all day and just stay until you earn out, and you can just mentor people if you want. But he wasn't interested. I think for him it was an ethical problem. Like, hey, I've lost interest and I need to move on. So I don't want to sit around to collect, a big earnout, even though.
And he went traveling around the world, right?
Well,
He went on some
yeah.
trips.
I think he's just getting interested in doing stuff again. Like, he didn't work for like 2 years, so he's kind of like, yeah. And I don't know when he'll start again, but.
Yeah, and Jay.
Yeah, so for us, I mean, we also had an earnout, but as I mentioned, our earnout's tied to revenues, actually, whether or not we're there, just revenues on the product basis. So, we aren't there now, because of the earnout. I mean, obviously, if we're there, we can help the revenue, but we're not really required to be there. I mean, for us, I think they did try and get employment contracts for like 2 years or something like that, which just I don't know. It's not really sensical. I mean, if they can't motivate us to stay for other reasons, I mean, you can't really see going for that. So no, I mean, we're sticking around because I mean we really did want to grow. I mean, we think the security market for devices is still really tiny, and we think it's going to grow. So we're going to keep growing our baby with this team and keep going forward. So I think we're pretty happy with the outcome.
Great.
Hi, my name is Vicky. You had mentioned earlier positives and negatives of being in Seattle. I'd love to hear what you think those are.
I think all of you probably already know this stuff, but I'll say my opinion, because I think there's just this great debate all the time. I think the positive of being here is that I think the people here are definitely more loyal. They don't have ADD. They're not looking for that shiny object every 3 minutes. There's a little bit less of an echo chamber in here. And that, honestly, there are a lot of great talent here. I mean, this is a great place to be. The negative of Seattle is that sometimes really big, crazy ideas aren't as well accepted as quickly. So I think we tend to, I say we because I'm in Seattle too, right? But we tend to be a little later to accept new ideas. And when you see these crazy ideas, honestly, they're generally coming, from the Valley. And there's a reason for that. It's because people there made money on really crazy ideas, and they're out to fund really crazy ideas. But there are lots of negatives about the Valley too, obviously. So did I answer your question? Is that pretty succinct?
Sure. I mean, it's opinion, right?
Yeah. How about you? You've been in Seattle, I'm sure, for a while now, right? So have you found the same thing?
So I have to preface that a little bit with I have 2 companies. I have a service business that we've had for over a decade, and just newly started a technology startup. So our service business completely self-funded. We've never been the type of people to borrow money, and so we've just been really lucky. And kind of dipping my toe in the startup world is a totally different ballgame, right? Things just have to go faster. You have to invest a lot more money. And so I'm just trying to figure that out. I know for a fact that, yes, people tend to be a little bit, I've never worked in the Valley, so I can't say if they're more loyal than there. But we've been really lucky. But also, part of that has to do with how we find our talent, and the reason why we started the business in the first place was specifically about people and not really about the work. So I think in a lot of sense it's really how you set up your business and what your goals are, and if your goal is to find really loyal people, and hearing your story, it sounds like you work with somebody who you were friends with from middle school. Sounds like that was your intent, to work with people who would be more loyal and who would want to stick with you to build a business. So,
Do you have any, Jay? You have any input on? You've never worked in the Valley, right?
No.
Yeah.
I think, just kind of a difference that I see. I think going to entrepreneur meetings. When I first started our company, I went to some MIT forums and NWEN and Keiretsu and some things like that. And then again, when we were considering growing with funding, I kind of got back in for a couple times. And I don't know. I think possibly in the Valley, might have had someone who was a bit more wild-eyed, who kind of saw what we saw, that it was going to be a really big market, and we were a good place to start. Who could have championed that? I mean, I'm not really that guy to push that, so I think I'm here, so so I suppose I fit in. But I think so I was saying our other competitor who also started the same year is in the Valley, and they have just multiple rounds of VC funding. I think it's the same thing. They just see a vision of I don't know, being Symantec for your cell phone, instead of like what Symantec is for the PC now. So definitely huge ideas. I mean, just swinging for the fences. So that might be a little different.
Dave, are we calling it a wrap?
Any other questions from the audience? I'm sure that, I hope that maybe our panelists have a few minutes to hang around afterwards in case you'd like to introduce yourself or have any additional questions. But I think we should thank you, Alex, and Jay and Chia for participation in this program, and we'll call it an official wrap for the evening.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.